So good afternoon and welcome. My name is Barry Knowles. I'm the AHRC Senior Grants and Policy Manager. Just as a matter of housekeeping, we are recording this session, and the recording will be circulated to peer review college members afterwards and also published on our website. We've also got, you can also access the live transcription using the CC button on the Zoom toolbar. So the format today is that it'll last an hour. We've got a 25 to 30-minute presentation for you on the new schemes. Then after that, we'll have a Q&A session, and we'll manage that by questions, where you submitting questions through the Q&A function on the Zoom toolbar. And we've got some colleagues in the background who'll be managing and collating those. Just for purposes of managing the questions, we find it easier to remove the questions as and when we've logged them. So if you see your question disappearing, it's not because it has truly disappeared. It means we have logged it and noted it. You can submit those questions at any point. However, you might want to wait until after you've seen the presentation. So we'll make a start, and I'm now going to hand you over to Jaideep.
Thank you. Thank you, Barry. I am on slightly unstable Wi-Fi here at the office, so I trust you can hear me. You don't really need to see me as long as you can see the slides. But Barry, if you could just indicate to me in case I do drop off, I'll then make sure that I revisit any parts of my presentation today that you may have missed. Colleagues, welcome from me as well. I'm Jaideep Gupte, the Director of Research Strategy and Innovation at the Arts and Humanities Research Council. And can I just say how delighted I am to see so many join us today. I mean, the peer review college is, of course, fundamental to the success of our responsive mode offer. So I'm delighted to be sharing our plans with you today. And it's a huge vote of confidence in our vision that continues to hold responsive mode schemes as core to our portfolio. You have the agenda before you, but Barry, if I can ask you to progress to the first slide. I wanted to just lay out the context for you a little bit before we get stuck into the details. So we started these changes some time ago, towards the end of 2021, working with members of our advisory group, which really challenged us to review our responsive mode offer. And the proposition was to ensure we were supporting larger, bolder, more impactful research projects. So since then, we've held focus groups last year to understand the issues and challenges you all face in applying and in delivering our responsive mode schemes, and a further set of workshops in March this year, specifically looking at our Catalyst and Curiosity schemes, which you'll hear more about today. I wanted to narrow in on the context, as I said, that led us to these changes. So if I can set the needle back to 2021, when AHRC developed what we think was a clear and ambitious vision, a vision that, as I said, placed responsive mode discovery research alongside three other vision sectors: addressing global challenges, supporting and closeness with our cultural assets, and a maturing relationship with the creative industries. Now, alongside this, we developed our theory of change, which outlines our desire to be open, to be willing to do things differently, to support the best ideas. So we carry forward our role in championing for the arts and humanities, but practically speaking, we needed to do so in the context of a rising cost of living, indeed the cost of carrying out research. Now, this might seem as an obvious point, but some of our schemes had not been substantially reviewed in over a decade. The upper limits of our grants were out of date and seemed to be narrowing the scope of our ambition. So coming together as part of UKRI also raised the significance of a reduced research bureaucracy that could at the same time lead on shifts in research culture. So this brought us to matters like the technicians commitment, our people and culture strategy, and indeed to learn from other councils and their schemes that our fellow councils know work well for their communities. And finally, in the recent past, we have received keystone reviews, the grant and TICAL reviews, that do require us to make it easier to apply for public funding, to reduce the complexity of our schemes. Barry, if we could go to the next slide. So this brings me to what we hope our changes will achieve. The changes we are proposing deliver explicitly against our commitment to enable a diverse and inclusive discovery research in our responsive mode offer. And our intention is to increase flexibility so researchers can make the decision as to what approach to constructing a project will best suit their discipline or thematic area. We want to improve support for progression through our schemes. So the simplified structure of 4 schemes, we hope is better tuned to scaffold each career stage and therefore provide increased support for talent development. We want to support emerging arts and humanities talent. Our ECR success rates have suffered of late, and this was quite central to our thought process in building these schemes. And in the same vein, we have introduced a focus on outcomes and competencies to replace the sort of rigid definitions of career stages, alongside better support for all career stages, certainly for early career, but recognizing that there are other points where there may be barriers in accessing our funding. And finally, and certainly not the least, our aim is to offer provision for larger and more ambitious projects. Now, this is really about being able to better deliver impact in society, to deliver the sort of larger, bolder research, including team-led projects, building capability in the community to deliver arts and humanities research leadership, and to underscore a sense of leadership in an interdisciplinary, even multidisciplinary context. At this stage, Barry, if we could just stop sharing our screen briefly, as I would like to bring in Professor Helen Abbott, who is a member of our of AHRC's advisory board. Helen, if you could offer some brief insights on the aims and impacts of these schemes as you've been advising us through this process.
Thanks so much, Jaideep, and it's a pleasure to speak today. As Jaideep says, I am a member of the AHRC advisory group. I have been a member since September 2021, which is when this work started in earnest. I've also previously been a peer review college member, and I am also a professor of languages at the University of Birmingham. And in just outlining a few of the kind of the aims and ambitions in the contribution that an academic advisory board member could make to this whole process, it might just be helpful to hear that there was a subgroup formed of the advisory board who worked really quite intensively on this to challenge and to question what was needed. And we put a focus around 4 major areas. The first was around what was missing from the funding landscape. The second was around the barriers and opportunities. And as you'll have heard already from Jaideep's slides, some of those keywords emerging are things like flexibility, things like accessibility, certainly diversity and inclusivity. And we were putting that against a third focus around our appetite in the arts and humanities sector, as well as in the AHRC, for risk-taking, and particularly an observation around how reviewers and the peer review college were commenting and critiquing around the risk profile of certain projects. So we wanted to explore different possible approaches to risk. And the fourth focus was really around people and roles. We know that in the arts and humanities funding landscape, we have a mix of solo researchers, we have networks of researchers, we have teams of researchers, but we also have increasingly different and diverse types of collaborators, including international collaborators, participants and collaborators from the culture organisation sector broadly, and the creative industries, which is a big emerging kind of stream of work in the arts and humanities funding landscape. So this was also echoing a wider shift in the UKRI funding landscape and kind of wider conversations that were taking place around people and roles. And I think you'll hear a bit more about that as we go through the outline of the two new schemes in particular. But what those focused discussions, those kind of challenges and debates led to amongst the advisory group working together with the AHRC teams on these new schemes was an emphasis on both people and ideas. And in the two scheme names that we're going to talk about particularly today, one of the names is called the Catalyst Scheme, and a refrain that becomes quite useful to us is thinking about catalysing both people and ideas, with the curiosity at the heart of that as well. And curiosity and the Catalyst schemes, as we were devising them and putting the frame around that, is all about putting the kind of the inclusive approaches at the heart of what we do. So that means not being defined in time by someone's job or role, recognising that academic careers, particularly in the arts and humanities, have changed quite significantly over the past 5 to 10 years, much more bumpy for many starting out in their careers, but also for those in the latter stages of their career. So you'll hear us talking a lot, for example, about self-defining eligibility for some of these bids. The purpose of that is to enable broader eligibility rather than having kind of set definitions about, 5 or 7 years post PhD or being in a permanent role for particular types of applicant. That also tallies with a broader shift in research culture. So prioritising the maturity of a research idea rather than the maturity of the researcher. So that catalysing people and ideas is thinking about how those two things sit together really well. So we hope you'll hear in the next few minutes quite a lot of detail about the overall ambition about the whole grant scaffold at the AHRC now. So the whole set of schemes are designed to give much more opportunities according to the type of research and the research idea, rather than defined by, for example, early career researcher or later stage research. So if I can just sum up before I hand on to my colleague Ruth. We put that question and challenge to ourselves in the subgroup and to the AHRC, and we can put that now to our peer review college and to those applying for these schemes. What difference will this project or research make in the world? Fundamentally, that's what we're hoping these schemes will enable us to address. So I'm going to hand over to Ruth and reset the slides.
Super. Thank you very much, Helen and Jaideep. Let's give a sec for these. Perfect. So we'll look at what obviously the previous schemes were, and then we've got on the right there what we'll have going forward. So by now I'm sure you're familiar with the previous structure that we had, and we're operating this essentially up until the start of this calendar year. And we've been going through a process of transitioning over to the structure that's on the right-hand side. And currently we have the first round open for each of those schemes. I do have a slide later on talking about the rounds, so if anybody is unfamiliar with that, don't worry, that'll be coming up. But what I'm hoping you're seeing just even in this early table is some of that simplification really that's already been touched upon today. So if we go on to the next slide, please. I'll give you a visual. First and foremost, you can start to see really the structure of that scaffold starting to take place. And there are a few things worth highlighting while we're on this slide. Firstly is that the scaffolding itself, it's flexible. It's not at all intended to be linear. You can move between the schemes as appropriate for your career, rather than feeling like you need to sort of move from one to another. We're also really keen to acknowledge that we sit as part of a wider research and innovation ecosystem. So the porosity between us, other funders, other organisations is incredibly important. And the purple arrows there, you can see the way that we're almost sort of conceptualising how our responsive mode offering maps onto the ERC model of Starter, Consolidated, or Advanced. We'll touch on research grants first. So the purpose of the scheme remains unchanged. It's still all about larger collaborative research projects. But what we have done is change the funding limits. So where previously we were looking at projects coming in from £50,000 up to £1 million, we've now moved that, increased the lower threshold to £300,000 and increased the upper threshold to £1.5 million. Very much acknowledging we're wanting to see that ambition coming in, but we also need to be realistic and pragmatic about the fact that we do also have an increased cost of research in the current landscape. And also follow-on funding at the bottom there. At this point in time, we've not made any changes to that scheme, but we do recognise that there is potential to review and adjust the scheme as we go forward in response to these changes that we're making to make sure that our whole responsive mode structure is fit for purpose. So we'll be looking to commission an evaluation of that in due course. But if we go to the next slide, thank you very much. We'll touch on some of the details of the new schemes. So of course, we've got Curiosity on the left and Catalyst on the right. Curiosity being very much developing further research opportunities and new agendas. Let me first say at the start here, we've indicated projects between £1 and £100,000. Of course, we know that we are not going to be getting projects coming in anywhere close to £1. That's purely an artifact of the system that we work within in order to be able to input opportunities onto the funding finder and have the flexibility that we want. We have to put an artificial lower number in. I'm going to get ahead of that one. But within Curiosity, the ambition is very much about funding larger awards compared to the previous research networking scheme. Many of the USPs for that scheme are coming into Curiosity. However, what we've done is widened that scope, increased the flexibility, so that a much broader range of activities can come in under these awards than could under the networking route. And really, as Helen and Jaideep have both touched upon, it's all about how we can fund more high risk, more high reward projects. So, you know, if we're thinking about how we might want to innovate within these awards, we really are hoping to support projects that are particularly bold in how they engage with the wider public, think about new ways, models and ways of doing knowledge exchange. And again, as sort of alluded to on the previous slide, we've thought really long and hard about our role as a strategic funder. What we don't want to do is to duplicate what other funders are better positioned really to support and fund, but we're wanting to offer something new and different that will indeed spark the new and genuinely novel. So, of course, as our peer review college members, you'll be wondering what we're doing with assessment. So we want the assessment process for these awards to really evaluate the potential for impact. And we will be wanting to empower our panels to support those risky, bold, novel ideas without creating a complicated review process. So we'll go for a much lighter end of the spectrum there, and we'll be running assessment panels for these schemes. So, of course, that doesn't generate written peer review feedback at this point in time. But what we'll be doing over the course of the next couple of months as we prepare for our first rounds of panels, we'll be producing enhanced guidance so that you're fully supported in terms of how we would like you to conceptualise and sort of prioritise when we're thinking about bolder and riskier ideas. Just quickly on an eligibility note, our standard policies apply to this scheme. As sort of Helen really alluded to, we're not providing sort of comprehensive lists of eligible activities. We're keeping it very open. So by not being prescriptive, by being flexible, we're wanting to really empower the entire research community to determine what is needed for a project and articulate that within the application. Catalyst over on the right. accelerating individual careers and group careers as well, of course, but moving towards independence within research and building leadership experience. So we've got projects between £100,000 and £300,000. And where this is sort of rooted is very much on that gap that's already been spoken to, that we identified for early careers, and we're really wanting the scheme to address that. So again, as Helen noted, we've got that different approach to eligibility. So we're not going to have fixed number of years post-PhD, for example, in order to define early career. Instead, what we're using is more sort of a competency-based model, whereby applicants will self-identify, and that will be closely aligned to their grant holding history and their relevant skills and experience, and how that fits alongside the aims of the scheme. So we'll include a section on the application form where every applicant can articulate that. So it should be very clear for reviewers and panelists on this scheme. Worth noting, of course, what we are doing is very much broadening out what our definition of sort of a first substantial grant is. So it's not only about early career researchers, we're also opening up to mid-career, senior career. We're not placing those sort of labels on the scheme themselves, but instead we're just very well aware that we wanted to be able to target individuals who perhaps have had a non-traditional career path and might have found themselves falling outside of our previous structure just because of where we've drawn those lines. So by removing the bureaucracy, increasing the flexibility, we're hoping to see much more diversity really coming in through the scheme. In terms of the development focus of the scheme as well, very much it's people as much as ideas. So as much as we want to enable solo projects, team-oriented projects in, what we really want to see is a justifiable development plan for every single member of the project team and the project lead. Really that they're embedded within the project design and the management. It's not a tick box exercise on top. And then also embedding appropriate support structures in place. So for example, we've included provision to have costs for mentoring, where previously that could have been a barrier to actually include mentorship within a project. So in terms of assessment for this, we'll be running a very comparable process to our research grants scheme, where it is written peer review, a PI response, and then a moderation panel. And we felt that that was really important to retain, so that emerging researchers are receiving full feedback on their applications in the form of those written peer reviews. Finally, just in terms of eligibility, what we won't be doing is providing individual eligibility advice to applicants. So we're wanting to really create a cultural step change by opting for an approach of self-definition, so that applicants are very able to apply for what they need when they need it. It's open to articulate the case. Could we go to the next slide, please? Super. So we've got a couple of slides just with some imagery from the new funding service to give you a bit of an overview. And when we come to the Q&A, we will also have our colleague Steph Day, who is part of the Simpler Better funding programme, is actually AHRC's business partner within that programme. So if you have questions on how the system will work, she's well placed to answer those. But I hope by now you will have heard of the funding service. The project really is wanting to bring together all constituent parts of UKRI, bring us together closer in the way we're approaching developing funding opportunities and delivering them. So what you should hopefully be starting to see early signs of is more simplification and more consistency. So that, again, it's across UKRI and also within our own funding opportunities. Important to note, what you can see, hopefully, it's a wee bit small, but hopefully you can see on the image a little feedback link in the beta ribbon. So the Simpler Better funding team are continuing to develop the system in response to all the feedback they receive. It's entirely iterative. So really strongly encourage anybody with any feedback, you, your colleagues, anybody within your institutions, outside of your institutions, if there's any feedback you have, please do log it via those links. We also, of course, would be more than happy to have feedback coming in by email as well, but it will allow the developers to really ensure that the system is being built in a way that best suits you. And then lastly, on this slide, what we are very much embracing is sort of a challenge that's been put to us by the Simple Data Funding Programme of only asking for what we need once at the point at which we need it. So what that means in terms of applications is far fewer attachments. Everything's within the one form, section by section. And what that also enables us to do is automate some of the eligibility checks that we do internally, so we can streamline the application process and really reduce any returns for amendment that we may have asked for previously. If we can go to the next slide, please. So again, the simplicity that you hopefully are starting to see at that application stage follows through for assessors. So when it comes to completing a review, rather than needing to open up, 10 plus attachments, depending on the application that you're looking at, you'll see it all on one screen. And you can scroll through. You can also, there's a print function as well. So if you want to save it as a PDF or print it out, you're able to do that as well. It's also all built to work very well for screen readers as well, and accommodate any other accessibility requirements that anybody might need. It's built into in alignment with government digital standards. But in terms of sort of where we're thinking about how we're bringing in the simplicity, that follows through to our guidance as well. So each section, you'll be able to see the guidance that an applicant was given alongside their response. Again, avoiding sort of picking through a separate call document and then all those other application materials. So you'll be able to see that the application questions, the assessment criteria are aligned and should make it much more straightforward. And then for panelists, we don't have a screenshot of the panel section yet, but everything will be able to be done within the service. So that, again, reading documentation, but also submitting scores. And this should result in a much smoother experience in the run-up to the panel meeting itself. I can go to the next slide. Super, thank you. So anybody who really appreciates an overview table, what we have here is the word limits that are in place for each of the schemes. So again, seeing greater standardization, we really have sort of more proportionate variation within the approach section, which is just reflecting the fact that each of the schemes has different aims and different funding levels. So we're acting sort of proportionately to that. Down the left-hand side, you can see the same core question set, essentially, that other parts of UKRI are also using for responsive mode. Full details for that, of course, are on the UKRI Simple Data Funding web pages. We've got some links later on in the slides as well, and those will be circulated for you. But just a couple of headlines to draw your attention to. So where we previously were asking for a case for support, largely that's replaced by the vision and approach sections. But there is absolutely flexibility for any information that would have previously been in the case of support to be reflected in any other relevant section. And that's down to an applicant to decide where the most relevant place is to put that information. The applicant and team capability to deliver section that uses Resume for research and innovation principles and is replacing entirely our previous requirements for CVs and publication lists. So significantly shorter there. And then finally, what you won't see actually in this list is a data management plan. So we are trialing the removal of data management plans. But of course, if there are any ethical considerations in relation to the use of data, we'd still expect that to be reflected, but within the ethics and responsible research and innovation section instead. So where we're moving toward is every single funding finder entity for each opportunity should act as a one-stop shop with all the information that applicants need. And then that, again, carries through. So all the information that reviewers need should also be in place. And what that means is we are really looking at our approach to published guidance for all our stakeholder groups. And we're going to be changing that quite significantly over the course of the coming year as we respond to that increased simplification. So where we've got a 100+ page research funding guide, we'll be streamlining that. And where possible, we'll be using the same harmonised guidance as other parts of UKRI. Oh, brilliant. I don't even have to ask, this is fantastic. One final slide from me, transitioning to the funding service. Just a few reflections. So important to note that the funding service is being developed iteratively. So that means that the functionality available will change over time. So Just as an interim measure, we are launching our responsive mode opportunities as consecutive rounds with set closing dates. And that's only so that we can ensure that each batch of applications receives fair and equitable treatment as we're in the course of a changing programme with Simpler Better funding. So as I said, we've got round 1 open at the moment. You can see that there'll be a very short pause before round 2 opens in the system. We will have a round 3, etc. And we are publishing dates as and when we are able to confirm when you can expect that they are arriving. But ultimately, it's operating quite similar to an always open scheme, just with slightly different administrative arrangements. So what I'm hoping is that it doesn't alter too much the community's approach to developing and submitting applications. And as long as we continue to receive steady stream of applications like we always have done, we'll continue to process them as they come in. So it's not really about closure dates as deadlines as such, it's just to enable applicants to submit to the right round based on when their application is ready. And so there's utter clarity over how the assessment will actually take place. Just one note for anybody who is in the process of preparing an application. At the moment, within the funding service, you can't copy applications across like you can in GES. So if you don't submit to round 1, you would need to start a fresh application in round 2. But the old application for round 1 would still be on the system and you would be able to refer back to it. It wouldn't be lost altogether. Just lastly from me, before we move on to questions, I'm really aware this all sounds like quite a lot of change. So just to reflect on what won't be changing as well. So the mission remains the same. We're still here to fund excellent research, no matter where it is found. That's absolutely a core commitment in our strategic delivery plan, vision and theory of change. All of those remain unimpacted. So what it means to conduct excellent research, therefore, also hasn't changed. And the discussions that are taking place across the sector about that, what that means, we really hope those do continue to go on. But what we're really wanting to achieve is simplifying the requirements we place on the community. The idea is that it should be much easier to articulate and assess excellence in research. And so just finally, the principles of assessment and decision making that are in place across the whole of UKRI, those also remain unchanged. And they're a core part of our role as a public body and commitment to live out the principles of public life. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Barry.
Thank you, Ruth. So I forgot to mention at the start, we will be circulating this slide deck with you all afterwards, that if you've provided your email address in the login to this session. The final 2 slides, I'm not going to talk you through them, but they contain some further information. The first one being various links to information from the AHRC about our schemes. And the second slide being a lot of useful information about the new grant system. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides now. And we're going to begin the Q&A session. So please do submit questions to the Zoom Q&A option on the toolbar, the Q&A thing, and we'll, as a panel, we'll work through answering those that we've received. If there are any questions we don't get to answer, we will collate them all, save them all, and we will work our way through answering them afterwards. And we'll circulate all the questions and answers we've received, both answered and unanswered during the session, with you all afterwards. And of course, just to say, any questions we've received in the session or any of the other webinars we've done, all gratefully received. They are helping us to improve our guidance, to remove ambiguity and any gaps in guidance. So I have some colleagues working away in the background who are going to help us with these questions and pose them to us. So Beth is going to work through the questions received so far and pose them to us as the panel. So Beth, are you ready to go?
Yeah, thanks, Barry. So we've had a few questions come in about various topics so far, so thank you everyone for sending those in to us. I'll start with questions around eligibility. So are there any circumstances where AHRC would not accept a self-identification by a colleague as an early career researcher, as AHRC will not be advising on this in advance? There's concern that this may therefore mean that a full application is rejected on that basis. Would you be able to clarify at all, please?
I'll start, but everybody else, please do chip in. So we wouldn't be rejecting sort of as an office check on those grounds. Instead, the intention is very much that applications would be put through to peer review, and it will be expert peer reviewers essentially who will be checking whether or not the case has been made within the round, within the application, and is articulated and justified well. They will be asked to ensure that an application responds to the scheme priorities that have been set out, but it's being looked at holistically rather than, we're not thinking about it as a way to sort of filter or try and trip people up or anything like that ahead of assessment.
Thanks, Ruth. And are the Catalyst Awards only for researchers without prior experience leading a significant project? Will early career researchers still be separately funded under the standard grants?
Good question. So yes, the Catalyst scheme is indeed intended for anybody who doesn't have experience leading a project in and of their own right. As part of the move to simplification, we've taken away the early career research route for research grants. So that means that any applications coming in from early career researchers, which are still very, very welcome, would be assessed within the round as a whole cohort. And instead, what we're hoping is having the whole scheme of getting my words mixed up, Catalyst, having that scheme where the focus is very much on developing that independence and not being prescriptive about the career stage. We're hoping that that's a nice double prong that actually will really benefit the early career researchers the most. It's actually the strongest way for us to be able to ring fence funding for those researchers.
Thanks, Ruth. And is there any plan or intention at all to include research co-investigator roles? Something that's been identified as being very useful in other councils as a way to supporting early career researchers and those on precarious contracts.
We haven't changed our policy. I think we never did have that role or support that role on our projects. At this time, we haven't looked at that or considered that. So going forwards, short and the medium term, we'll be sticking with our structure of a lead and co-leads. We're not yet or haven't considered adopting the researcher co-lead.
Thanks for confirming, Barry. Just moving on to sort of assessment process. You mentioned that written peer review will be retained for the Catalyst Award, but is that changing for the Curiosity scheme?
Yes. So Curiosity will be running assessment panels rather than moderating panels. So that means that an application will come in, go through basic eligibility checks, and then go straight to an expert panel who performs a dual function of acting as a peer reviewer and then also as a second stage acting as a moderator. So every application will still get its fair assessment in and of its own right, but that'll happen at the same time as then the tensioning happening later in the meeting to produce the rank list.
And just following on from that, in terms of the Curiosity Awards, will applicants get any feedback at all on their applications when they're unsuccessful?
So that is something that we are actively looking at. The Simple Better Funding Programme is developing a feedback policy, and I don't know, Steph, if you want to speak to that at all, but we're finalising our plans. That'll take a little while, I think, because there's a question across council as to how we can implement in the best way for the benefit of all. So I don't have a set answer, unfortunately, for that question, but it's a very good one.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think you answered it well.
Thanks both. And with the more defined deadlines, can reviewers be expecting a kind of bunching of requests at particular times of year? Are there particular plans for distribution of those?
I can go in on this. This kind of really depends on applicant behaviour. I mean, we have created a disruption for the flow of applications by pausing schemes and launching new ones and ceasing previous ones. So we've created the disruption, but we are aware that that has created a bit of a peak, a trough, and probably another peak in applications. And so I think it's looking likely that certainly, I'd say for this calendar year, there could be, yes, both peaks and troughs in us issuing requests to conduct peer reviews.
That could be. The only thing I'd add on that is just we are aware that as our PRC, you're undertaking reviews essentially on a volunteer basis. We're very cognizant of that. And so if we're approaching you too much within a time period, please just let us know. We'd much rather you alert us to the fact that you can't do a review sooner, and then we'll go on and we'll find another match. It's no problem at all. Just let the team know.
Ruth and Barry, if I can just add to that, you know, very much of this is learning by doing. Certainly in terms of assessing the volume or the demand that we receive, as Barry said, will depend very much on applicant behavior. But we recognize these are new schemes. They'll take time to settle across the communities. They'll, you know, various disciplines, various groups of researchers may encounter different sorts of challenges. So the more we hear back in terms of feedback, as well as from your point of view as reviewers of those proposals, if there's really barriers or you identify opportunities that could help the process run smoother, we'd love to hear them, and we'd love to in particularly take that on board in terms of how we might assess demand of the new schemes moving forward.
Thank you all, that's really helpful. In terms of the rounds and the processing times, with the current deadlines, what times do you envision the review panels to run? Is there a sort of schedule of when those will be?
I'll go, but Barry, then do come in if I miss anything. At the moment, we're anticipating the first panels won't happen until either the first ones at the very end of this year or early next year, realistically. But we are looking at closing dates for round one of research grants and follow-on funding in the next couple of weeks, and then the new schemes a month later. So we'll be really responsive to what happens at that point. If we see peaks, if we're able to process anything earlier, we'll look to do that. So indicatively, you can think about the timeline that's on the funding finder entity as a majority, but it does mean that we're hoping to get some done earlier. And if any fall after that period of time, for any reason, we'll be communicating with applicants proactively so they can understand what is happening with the project.
Thanks, Ruth. And I think this might be one for Steph on whether reviewer templates for the responsive mode schemes will be shared at all.
Hi, so I'm Stephanie Day. I'm from the programme which is developing the new funding service. So the way that you do review in the new funding service is different to the way you do it in JES Legal. In the funding service, you're able to read the whole application within the service. You don't need to download PDFs necessarily to read it, or you can print it as a PDF if you prefer to, or print it, bring it out. And then on another tab is where you add in your review, and instead of having the templated boxes that you're used to in JES, you instead get a free-form text box where you're given instructions directly above about how to submit a high-quality review. And as part of this review, we will be asking you to structure your review as per the assessment criteria headings. So another point to touch on with TFS is that with these core question sets that were discussed during the presentation, we've now made it far simpler for both applicants and assessors to understand what the assessment criteria is. Within the section headings, you can see the precise assessment criteria, and these are the assessment criteria which we ask the reviewers to directly comment on. So it's no longer finding bits of information throughout several different attachments. It should be all discrete within the separate sections, which will help you submit your review. So there isn't a template as such, it is a free-form box, but you're given instructions within the service about how to complete the review and the importance of addressing it all to the assessment criteria. We do actually have a new web page, which it goes through how reviewers use the service as well, which is a link on the presentation as well that Barry showed previously.
And just to add to that, there's quite a lot of material out there. So via the AHRC Peer Review College newsletters, we're going to, over the next few months, we're going to use that avenue to signpost for you all where the information is that you need about the system and our new schemes as information evolves and develops.
Thank you. And will there be details of specific training available for AHRC PRC members, and in particular sort of on the length and structure of those reviews?
We are currently looking at what resources we can produce to best support you. So we'll take that particular bit of feedback about length and structure away and ensure that we built that in. That's really helpful. If other colleagues also have thoughts on what sort of things you'd like to see, please do let us know. Something that's been in the works for a while, and we're still refining how we're actually going to approach this, is more support on how we can better approach equality, diversity and inclusion within applications. That's a key priority, and something we want to be able to support you to be able to get right.
Thanks, Ruth. Following on to our next question, how will AHRC ensure that peer reviewers don't prioritise those who have a track record of delivering on grants and instead promote those who want to gain experience or more experience?
I'll start, but please do everybody chip in. So I think it's about being really clear that we are being outcomes focused within the way that we've articulated the schemes, and also being more competency focused within the way that we've constructed eligibility. So we'll include that within the guidance, make it incredibly prominent. And then I think there's a question for us in advance of the first panels to think about how we frame that at the start, to set the tone, to encourage anybody who is within the panel hearing behaviour that doesn't sound like is in line with those really key aims that we have, to just highlight it, much in the way that we have our unconscious bias section at the start. We'll end up with better outcomes, I fully believe, if we all work together in the room and really constructively challenge one another. So if you do see that in a panel, please alert us. That's the only way I think that we're going to be able to actually get these reviews over the lines, if we all do work together, and reviewers and panelists come together to help us do that. But please do the rest of the panel come in as well.
Ruth, if I could just add, this goes back to the point around step change in culture that we all referred to, but Ruth, you kind of you underscored in your presentation. This is a journey that we are committed to travel on, but we're recognizing that we don't have all the answers scripted on a paper from day one. This is very much round one. It's very much part of an iterative process where fine-tuned iteration through feedback, but also through a variety of sort of engagements with the broader community. And we're really intending to keep our ears close to the ground, right across the board, wherever our staff interact, wherever our advisors advisory board, council members interact with us and feedback the sort of conversations that are out and about in the community. We're prepared to take that on board and work those into the new rounds. You know, from our hunch is, though, that these changes are indeed fundamental, so they should produce results that are different from the usual suspect. So one would hope the peer review college, the panelists, the chairs of panels would take that on board as these applications go through the assessment process.
Thank you all. We've had a question asking how risk will be assessed in the new schemes and sort of how AHRC defines risk.
I can start, but Helen, you'd unmuted yourself as well. But I'll hand straight to you after. So I think the way risk is envisaged is a balance between high risk and high reward. I think that's the first port of call, is to internalize that our new schemes are intending to have that big impact, and the reason that gets interpreted as risk is because it is a shift from what was seen to be the norm. And again, this comes back to the step change that we're hoping to instill. In many ways, the scale of that risk, how it is balanced with a sense of reward at the end of the project, or indeed in the duration of the impact it has, not only on the research field, but also on the career path of the researchers involved, are all aspects that the peer review college will have views on. And this will also, again, iterate in how we identify and support the boldest of projects, will, I think, develop as the rounds go on. Helen, can I pass to you?
Yeah, totally echoing that. And I suppose if I just put the counter to that, which is, we have recognised we have a previous funding landscape which was quite conservative, risk averse. You know, if this person has proven that in the past they've been able to publish a book or secure funding, therefore we think that's less risk averse and we can deliver. You know, they will deliver and therefore we'll award them the funding. That kind of approach that we'd had before is quite exclusive. And as we move towards a much more inclusive approach, which is more accessible, more flexible, it is absolutely about that network. I use the term network, not in terms of the network and grant, but the network between the people and the ideas. And that will be a real challenge for us to put into place as we move to these schemes. The bit which is, does the AHRC have a definition? Proactively, we don't want to define, in the same way we don't want to define eligibility by career stage, or, you know, how many books you've done, or all of those kind of previous indicators, because we hear loud and clear from the community and from our academic colleagues that those are the standard kind of structural barriers that have been disabling certain career opportunities, funding opportunities. So it comes with, the risk taking comes with both the ideas, innovation, and with the inclusive agenda of our EDI mission as well. So that will be an important part of how we get this right, and how we deliver ultimately.
Thank you both. Moving on to some more funding service type questions. The new system doesn't allow other co-investigators to see the application as it's developed. Is there any plan to change this at all?
Currently in the system, if you have an account and if you're part of a core team member, you can see what grants you're involved in at the moment. So you can see high level information, but you can't at the moment drill down to the detail. So as you're aware, in funding service, we are developing it in an iterative and agile way. This means that as we're developing it, we're listening closely to users' feedback, such as yourself, as well as research councils, and really responding to those needs that come out. In this first phase, when we've been building it, we've been prioritizing the end-to-end process, focusing on the lead applicant's journey. And we will be moving on to different parts of the process as we move throughout this year, and one of these will be enabling all core team members to read the application. We know this is a need that will help collaboration, and it's on our pipeline, and we will be coming to it. So at the moment you can see that first initial step of seeing the title of the application you're involved in, and then later on we hope to build upon that further.
Thanks, Steph. And will the new narrative CV format be encouraged as the standard format for the new funding routes?
Yes, Barry, did you want to say something?
Yes, so yes, it will be. We're going to be adopting it, I think, for pretty much all our research grant style funding opportunities. So from this point onwards, any new opportunities that launch in the funding service for AHRC, and indeed other research councils, will use that standard harmonised format.
Thank you. Just conscious of time, so if I just go with one last question, this might be one for you, Barry. You'd mentioned the research funding guide will be reviewed. Can you say if the plan is to keep it as a PDF download that keeps all the information on the schemes in one place?
Yes and no. So in the short term, we're actually the first edit we need to make is quite conscious of the fact it's both referring to GES and the funding service, and it's a bit out of sync with what researchers are actually seeing. We have a long-term aspiration or medium-term aspiration to actually have the funding finder guidance as the sole opportunity or scheme-specific guidance, and the funding guide will be the partner document, which will contain more of the general AHRC and UKRI policy and process and rules. So yeah, at the moment we're quite conscious of the fact, and it's for both us and the community. There are always two documents referred to, which is not a great experience, we don't feel. But yes, certainly in a PDF format. We hear loud and clear that that's quite light, so we have no plans for me to remove the PDF format. If there's another quick question, Beth, sorry. If not, we'll wrap up.
We've got a question regarding the submission policy. Whether the policy's changed, and how that would work with the Curiosity grant.
Is that the resubmission policy?
Yes, sorry, resubmission.
We're not changing any of our policies around resubmission. So an application would have to be substantially reworked. If it had been through the assessment process, it would have to be substantially different from the previously submitted one.
In reality, I'd just add on that we've been asked about whether previous networking bids could come in under Curiosity. And broadly speaking, the answer is yes, because we're expecting that the different scheme scope means that the emphasis will be sufficiently different. The way the project is conceptualized, articulated, would be sufficiently different that we wouldn't be falling foul of the resubmission policy. So we don't want people to sit and worry too much about that. On that one specific point, if you get a bit stuck, please do just contact us, and we'd be happy to advise.
Okay, I think we're at time there. Thank you, panel. Thank you, Beth. This session is being recorded, and we will circulate details of it to all peer review college members, so anybody who couldn't attend can view this. We'll share the slide deck with all the attendees after this. We'll also work through any questions we weren't able to answer during the session, and we'll collate those, and over the next couple of weeks we'll work through answering them and circulate all the questions and all the answers to all the attendees. So yeah, with that, I'd just like to thank you for all attending. Thank you for your great questions, and have a good rest of your day.